in October 1st of 2008 marked 30 years that I've been involved in ministry. And so I was just asking the Lord about, am I doing what you want me to do? Should I keep doing the things that are before me? And so this phrase began to kind of germinate in my journal and began to carry with me from manager to missionary. Wrote that down and shared it with my wife, shared it with my covenant group of guys that I meet with just as a way of processing that. And so kind of carried that for several months. January 2009, January 29th, 2009, you remember these days because we were in a management team meeting trying to decide what to do with this ministry called The Gathering, which was a young adult college ministry that I was overseeing, had started and had been going for about 15 years or so, had about 300 in it, but it had become kind of very unique and different, had a missional kind of drive to it. There's a little bit of a discipleship drive to it. We're trying to figure out what to do with that. And so the discussion came because it was becoming kind of different than what Heartland as a large church was becoming. And so the conversation came down to, so do we align the gathering to be like Heartland at large, or do we kill it? And so at that moment, my mouth began to say things my mind hadn't given it full permission to say. Have you ever been in that place? I've never really quite experienced at this level where I kind of felt like God was just starting to take over in that moment. And I said, or maybe we need to send it and I need to go with it as a new church. And the management team turned to me and said, say more. And my mind says, I think you said enough. And my mouth kept going. And so the things I've been journaling about and dreaming about and thinking about kind of began to pour out. And I said, I just think the Lord is doing something here. I think we're supposed to send it out. I think we have to explore some new ways, particularly with this next generation. And my heart and passion has always been with the next generation. I was with Young Life, continue to be with college and 20-something has been my heart. And so within about an hour, and you all know how weird this is, everybody agreed this is what God was doing. And so I left that meeting thinking, oh, what just happened? I think I just resigned. I go home to my wife and said, you're not going to believe what happened in the management team meeting this morning, honey. And so then I began to get kind of panicked about, so now what do I need to know? What do I need to learn? What's God doing here? And actually Matt Adams, who's here with me, was in Germany, and we've been talking about some of the things we've been seeing happening in the next generation. We've been reading about a guy named Mike Breen in England who had been doing some things around called missional communities and discipleship. And so long story short, we tracked them down. They're now called 3DM Ministries, who's been really huge for us in terms of equipping us in what we're doing. So I offer that to you as a resource. Tracked them down. They were just starting a learning community. Mike referenced being one of those now. And they're just starting a learning community in May of 2009, and they invited us to come be a part of this kind of experiment. And because I started to read about the things they were doing, and we felt like we'd give that a shot. And when I got there, Mike said something that just radically changed how I began to think about that. And he said this. He said, you know what? As you look at the life of Jesus, he said to make disciples, and here's what he experienced. If you make disciples, you'll get the church. But if you make the church, you usually don't get disciples. And then that had me at hello. He just named something I couldn't articulate that had been my experience. Part of what had me leave Young Life and go and be a part of Heartland Community Church was, in Young Life we had kids. Young Life is an outreach to high school kids. They would meet Jesus, they'd go off to college, and they'd leave Jesus. The stats would tell us that 80% of Christian kids leave their faith in college. And now they're telling us that less than 4% of the millennials, the 20-somethings, are even in church anymore. And so what that motivated me back then to try to figure out what is wrong, what aren't we doing, and now I would say, I didn't know this then, but now I would say we weren't discipling them in a way that gave them the kind of roots to kind of go forward. And so that led me back when I was under the Heartland Community Church staff to start our summer internship, which is college kids. And I'm going to give you a little bit of our lingo and our vehicles as I talk about these things to help you. So, because this is still part of it. LTP, Leadership Training Project, is the name of our summer internship. It's an 8-week, and it's for college students. And this is what I had started about 18 or 20 years ago that we continue to do. And it's just a discipleship. It's an immersion. It's life on life that we do with college students. And I can tell you more about that if you'd like to know. But that was what watching college kids or kids go off to college and leave their faith motivated me to start discipling. I didn't know exactly that's what I was doing. But that's continued to inform us now. And what I'd like to do is maybe tell you a little bit of what we're doing, using the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, so you'll have a way of seeing those things. And one of the things that I realized and was watching was, as we discipled people, they didn't know how to take what we were doing and pass it on. It wasn't portable. And so I think one of the key questions about discipleship is it portable and reproducible? And so one of the ways we now talk about discipleship is this, and this is just what we would do as we're talking about it, is we would say, I think making disciples, when Paul said in Galatians 4:19, like a mother in labor, what I want for you, my disciples, is that Christ would be formed in you. And I think the destination, the purpose, the goal of discipleship is that Christ is formed in us. And so we're just saying that's it. Discipleship is about Christ being formed in us. And so what does that mean? And what's a simple, clear way of talking about who Jesus is? And so we talk about Jesus really had three dimensions to his life, three relationships, a three-dimensional life. He had in the Gathering Network, we called it the three loves of Jesus. He had love for his Father, a relationship with his Father, with his disciples, and with the world. And so we just say a disciple is supposed to look like Jesus' life. And so if Jesus had a relationship with his Father, we should. A relationship with disciples, we should. A relationship with the world, we should. And so we use just this lens of the three-dimensional life and put it over everything we do in ministry now. So in my own life, in our discipleship groups, we just might some days, one time we're together, say, hey, and we kind of make this a short version. Again, we've just gotten a lot of this language from Mike Breen, the 3DM Ministries. But we talk about this as your up relationship, your in relationship, and your out relationship. And so a real simple discipleship question we'll just ask is, up, in, and out, rank it this month. How you doing? What's stronger? Is your up, or you're in, or you're out? Or we might say 1 to 10, rank them. And we just go around and say, well, devotional life's pretty strong. Not really doing much about discipling anybody. Haven't been around the fellowship at all. But I got this little service thing going out here. I'm involved in the community somewhere. Okay. But it becomes a kind of an assessment tool. The life of Jesus becomes an assessment tool for our life. And we put it over our overall communities and our missional communities that we're doing. And so that is just a simple way. And what I noticed about this is people could remember a triangle. And people could share a triangle. So it became portable in a reproducible way to talk about what discipleship looked like and what it meant to follow Jesus. And this language became kind of common and easy to pass on, which I found has been super important. A second thing that we say about what discipleship looks like, and these guys have said this so well, so much better than I can, but it's about information, but it's not just about information. It's about imitation, and it's about innovation. And what's true is we have lots of information about discipleship, and this, I think we have, and I had understood discipleship as primarily transferring information to somebody else. So most of the discipleship that I had learned and been exposed to was passing on information to someone else. But again, you look at the life of Jesus, and he had this information was clearly a key piece of it, but he said, come follow me. We know the rabbinic way was to come imitate everything about my life, to the point where the disciples were saying, now when you pray, could you teach us how you do that? We've been watching you do that. We want to do it the way you do that. And so the question we have to ask in our discipleship is, are we not just giving information, but are we giving them a life? I love what Troy, his story is just one of imitation of things in his life that we could follow. And if you're in America, and it's interesting that people from England come over to America and say, you guys this is just your natural bent to innovate. And he says, this is just what you do all the time. You go for information, you quickly innovate. We have an entrepreneurial culture in America. We just start stuff. And we love to take information and innovate. But in discipleship, and this is, I think, why it lacks being portable and reproducible, is we need to see it in a real life. We need to see what it looks like. And so, again, these guys have said so well, we have to ask the question, does people have access to my life to be able to see what that looks like? Final thing I'll just say here, and then leave it on for some questions. I think there's an organized and an organic expression in discipleship. So in our context, our LTP is an organized way of discipling. It's an 8-week program. We bring college kids in. We have a program for those things. We do what's called D groups for a not yet or a new believer. And then we do what's called a huddle for leaders. And those are our vehicles, our organized vehicles of discipleship. But the other side is access to your life. And just as, again, has been said so well, sharing life in different ways. And so I think discipleship, you have to have this balance of the organized part, or some kind of vehicles that you can bring people together and give them information and share things with, but also as much as an organic access way you can. So, for example, the huddles that I lead, I try to do in my home if I can, because then they're in my home and they're around my wife and they get to see just how I do life. It's a way of giving access there. And I just end it there.
That's great. Questions, comments, your feedback.
What's your experience after your 8-week? How many of those college kids are doing it long term?
Yeah, with college, you're ministering to a parade.
Yes.
They're moving. And so what we found is it's about a 4-year when they come back to involve with us, but now many of them are going off and sharing the things and doing the things that they were being done to them, so to speak, in the summer. We've gotten a little bit better at that happening. I'll tell you that in 2009 when we started the gathering, I'm not sure how much, because I had to tell the story twice, but as the gathering launched, it was about 300 that was in a service, and we do about 10 or 15 interns each summer. Much like Jeremy's story, we preached that thing down, we discipled that thing down to about 150 that meet twice a month in our celebration service. And then twice a month we have missional communities, which are mid-sized groups, and then we have discipleship and huddles, because we just decided we're going to build a discipling culture first. And so in 2009, as I began to understand this, I took my staff, which was just the 3 of us, so we had one kind of formal huddle of 3 of us, and I just said, I'm going to share what I'm learning here, and then we're in a way that we can pass that on, and so that they could then start discipleship groups or huddles. And so currently now we have about 157 people in close to 40 huddles and discipleship groups. And I think we have about 9 of those that are, I would say, are 3rd generation. And our measuring stick, according to the disciple-making movement guys that know a whole lot more about this than I do, is if you have 4 generations, then you have the potential for a movement. And so we've been trying to talk about what would a movement look like. And I don't know about you guys, that word sounded really presumptuous to me. It sounded like I've never really seen that, but it seems like that's what Jesus did. That's what God is doing now. I think this room represents that. And so where our measuring stick is, until we have 4 generations of disciple making, we're not waving the "we've won yet" flag. So we're getting after that, and we're getting kind of stalled here. This might look strong, but I'm feeling like we still got a lot to figure out there. But my daughter, when she started driving, I said, "Hey, here's your insurance. It's in the little glove compartment. Here's your insurance guy. Here's who you call, information." She got married. She said, "Hey, Dad, can you give me the name of your insurance guy? Same guy you used?" So she's imitating me. 2 years later, she goes, "Hey, my husband and I, we figured out his insurance guy. We've kind of compared notes, and now we found a better insurance guy." So that's a life kind of example of that, but to try to give it the same example. So when I'm with my huddle guys, I'm regularly drawing and sharing these kind of ways to remember things. in a way that I'm saying, go do those things. Go share that this week. Use exactly what I've done. In fact, one of the things I've had to get kind of adjust in my life is doing the same thing over and over again. Felt like it wasn't creative, it wasn't helpful. But I found we need to repeat things in many, many ways. And so that's what I'm asking to do it. And then I'm saying, as you begin to start to disciple and huddle, if there's a better way to do this, then give it a shot. But I'm trying to ask them to share immediately what they're learning, which is a David Watson principle. Just as soon as you learn something, begin to share it type of thing. But share exactly what you've learned. So at the end of a discipleship time or a group like that, we'll say, hey, who can you share this with, what you just learned? Take this into the rest of your week. In your discipleship group, use exactly what I just did in your discipleship group. Can we do that? Go, absolutely, you can do that. And so that would be, does that help? Mm-hmm. Explain that? Looking at the life of Jesus, he had a relationship with the Father. He had a relationship with his disciples or the church. And then he had a relationship with the world. And so we said if our life is supposed to look like his life, then it's a good question to say, do I have a healthy, growing love for the Father? Do I have a healthy, growing love and relationship with disciples? And am I involved in the world? So it becomes a way to say, is my life becoming conformed to Jesus' life? Do I look more like Jesus today than I did yesterday?